My father enjoys fighting a lot. He was the one who taught me how to box, and I started when I was very small. This happened to me when I was 23 years old. At the time, I was attempting to become a boxer. We were collaborating in couples and competing with one another. This training was challenging and enjoyable for me. I was able to take my opponent to the ground in a real-life fight. I felt pleased and satisfied when the coach sounded the whistle to end the game. I stepped back but remained still. But just then, my opponent surprised me by coming out of nowhere. I lost my footing, went out on the ground, and had no ability to defend myself. They surprised and harmed me since I didn't anticipate them coming. They hit me out of the blue. I followed the coach to the restroom. My breathing became labored, and my thoughts became hazy. The coach immediately dialed the emergency number after realizing how dire things were. I was taken straight to the hospital by an ambulance that arrived at the training center shortly after. I was feeling hotter than usual when I arrived at the hospital. The doctor took immediate action to lower my body temperature. My health was still in danger even after they brought ice packs and wrapped them around my body. Suddenly, my eyesight became blurry. After a while, I cautiously opened my eyes again and found myself in an unfamiliar area. I was no longer experiencing the agony I had before arriving here. Everything settled down. The room appeared to be quite old. The walls of the room were smooth stone, and the roof was built of sturdy wood. The room's center table was constructed from weathered, rough wood. A person in front of me extended his arms as though to greet me. The man had a robe around his waist, a gold belt with an ornate buckle. A brown scarf was wrapped over his neck. He had black hair and a beard, and his complexion appeared healthy and flawless. This man, at the time, was unknown to me. I was later informed that the man was Jesus. Jesus remained silent, but kindness and love were visible in his eyes. They seemed to sympathize with me and soothe me. In the room, I noticed another woman. She was incredibly refined and noble. She had golden hair and was dressed elegantly in a blue outfit. When I saw her, I made an effort to shake her hand. Touching her hand made me feel wonderful all over. Suddenly, we were in a completely other place. We had the impression of traveling through space and time. This place appeared to be a garden. The yard was full with plants and flowers of every hue, which gave it a lovely scent. In the center of the courtyard stood a large fountain. A vast meadow extended behind the cascade. In the distance, one could see mountains and a lake. There were also a few tiny boats in the lake. Here was a glimpse of my former existence. I witnessed a great deal of historical events pertaining to every aspect of my life. I made a new acquaintance in elementary school who was frequently alone and excluded. I decided to approach him on my own, strike up a conversation with him, and become friends. I could see that I was having a positive impact on his life as he gradually grew friendlier and more self-assured. I also realized that when we last got into a fight, I said something terrible out of rage. I didn't consider the implications of what I said. My words damaged the other person's sentiments and strained our bond. I could recall a few little details I had observed. I was reminded of the memories that I had forgotten. Even though they may not signify much to other people, these items are significant to me. She took my hand once more, and we proceeded on another journey. It was as though we had returned to the Roman era. I found that building to be incredibly fascinating. The homes in the area were stunning, with thick oak beams adorning the doorways. I was drawn to one particularly impressive edifice because of its massive columns. There were several individuals dressed in extremely elegant clothing with a very sophisticated look. While they donned ornate gold jewelry, most people dressed simply and functionally. They all had energetic looks despite their basic attire. Suddenly, a large crowd gathered around. One of the males had on an overly large, scratchy linen robe. He had a tiny chain around his waist, and there was simple stitching on the cuffs of his robe. Someone else, a woman, had on a delicate pale blue blouse. One of them approached me and inquired about my identity. Though I had no idea what to say, I told him my name. Then, by inquiring further about my family, this guy seemed to want to confirm that I was who I claimed to be. They inquired about my grandfather at that point. When I told them, their broad smiles conveyed that they were pleased with my response. They introduced themselves as my grandfather's grandparents. The news took me by surprise. They were all very welcoming and expressed their happiness to see me. These family members hugged me and reached out to me. They hugged me, so I felt this was a secure place. They then escorted me into a large hallway. We were surrounded by a brilliant white light that gave us a joyful and peaceful feeling. I noticed a faint blue glow in the hallway that appeared to be emanating from an unknown source. I went to a beautiful place with my family. I noticed that there were several elegant and formal chairs in this room. Those chairs appeared to have symbolic meanings related to the family's strength and heritage. My grandfather's chair was displayed to me. At the end of the hall was this chair. It was crafted from pricey wood embellished with gems and other ornate designs. After a while, I sat on the chair, and it felt wonderful. I looked around for a moment. I noticed that everyone in the region was a member of my dad's family, which has been a family for hundreds of years. They were all seated in various types of seats that were provided for them. They sat silently and motionless. Individuals belonging to these tribes showcased their diverse cultures through their distinctive attire. Clothes for the previous generations were quite antiquated and basic. They dressed in white gowns made of dark brown cotton or rough linen. They didn't have really elaborate attire. Additionally, many of the outfits were more fashionable. Their woolen robes fit them snugly about the waist. The fit of their garments was more carefully tailored. By examining the clothing from several decades, I was able to determine that each age group had distinct characteristics and styles. I noticed that the older folks didn't approach me to strike up a conversation. I was confused about what was happening and questioned why. It might have been that they are naturally conservative or that they just hadn't gotten to know me yet. They said nothing to me, but from the expression in their eyes, I could tell they were concerned. Not too long after, I noticed a woman approaching me. Her radiant brightness was tough to overlook. She gave you a pleasant and friendly glance with her eyes. She approached me while clad in a pale blue robe. I felt a powerful wave of affection. This love made me feel comfortable and at ease like a baby in its mother's arms. Her deep and gentle gaze gave me the impression that it could see straight into my heart. She stroked my hair and murmured softly, "Child, you must now return to Earth, where you still have work to do." I didn't want to stay here any longer, but I knew I had to leave. I still had a lot of things to accomplish. My family surrounded me when it came time to say goodbye, telling me they loved me and wishing me luck. I experienced a sensation of floating in white light. With time, space and time began to bend, returning me to Earth. My dad was standing beside the bed and tightly clutching my hand as soon as I woke up. Tears were streaming from his eyes. He was unable to control his emotions. Now, for the first time, I saw my dad cry. My dad was a strong individual all of his life. I informed my grandfather what had happened when I arrived home. My grandfather had fallen 2 years prior and was unable to stand, so he needed assistance getting around in a wheelchair. It was a great blow to him, and at times he had felt so hopeless and miserable that he had considered suicide. I took a seat beside him and told him all I had witnessed in heaven. When he inquired about my family, I said that I had met a lot of them there and that everyone had been friendly and accepting. I described the room full of chairs and vividly described the happy and romantic setting where everyone was surrounded by love. My grandfather seemed to be changing in heart, based on what he stated. He appeared to be moved by his comments, and he began to let go of his old grief and rage. That's when I noticed a steely glare in my grandfather's eyes. With a smile, he lifted his hand and tightened his hold on mine.